are producing this. She said she's going to be on my show, and she said, "So, do you have a producer yet?" I said, "No." She said, "Oh my gosh, because it's a lot to do."
McKenzie says the agreement.
I'm by myself.
You are really, you remind me of me. You are so great. You're good at it. And before God sends us our help, He makes sure we're our help first, so we can enjoy it later.
Now, could you say that again? Because I think that there's some wisdom in what you're saying.
Congressman Adam Smith.
I said before God sends us help, He makes sure He's our help without it, so we can enjoy it really great later.
Your favorite leader.
Yeah.
And you don't let someone clean your house unless you know how to clean it first.
That's right.
I'm with you. You better know.
That they're basically idiots for not being able to.
They be to put stuff you don't know where it is.
Well, it's just, and you just need to know. How about that? Thank you.
WCPT Willow Springs and streaming worldwide at WCPT820.com.
So
we are Chicago's progressive talk, where facts matter. Now, your WCPT 820 Chicago traffic update.
Okay, but thank you so much. And I have something I want to ask you about, but I'll do it a little bit later, okay?
Okay.
It's an idea that I have.
South side, it's closed. Chicago
Work
south
with
side
you on it, and maybe we'll do it at push. I don't know. It needs to be a place where it can be socially distanced, but it's a musical idea.
Outbound I-57,
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody, yeah. At the end of the day, God is so amazing. Okay. It's crazy, amazing. I was telling a friend of mine, whatever advice you give, it better be scripture aligned. Because if it don't, it's a mixture, and you'll be confused. So when God speaks to you clear, it don't matter what's going on. Pandemic, mandemic, clandemic, whatever He speaks to you, you'll know it needs to be done.
That's true. Well, I see clearly now, I should say.
Yes.
Did I mention the
And so there are a lot of things that I said, okay, I just need to go on and do this, I need to do this, I need to do that, I need to do that, I need to do this.
Select style.
And so let me say hello to you, Linda and Carol Crowley and Linear Bob out there on the left coast. I love that. And Vanderlei down there in Brazil, sending you much love. Gloria Scales Brown, how you doing, sweetie? We're going to be talking about the Gabby Petito case and Brian Landry, her fiance, whom everybody's looking for, and the lead time. Well, the approach that the police had to this whole case, they gave Brian Landry and his family a whole lot of space. Why is that? Why is that? Why is that? And then we, of course, looked at the fact that this woman who was missing, she garnered so much attention, and she should have.
30.
But that didn't happen. That doesn't happen for Black and brown people. So we've got to talk about that too. And the debt ceiling with Dr. Maxwell. What is up COVID-19 with Dr. Deborah Verholden, and of course, good news with Pastor Darius Brooks right here on the Santita Jackson Show. Everybody like and share. Please, Raphael, how you doing, sweetie? Carol, Left Coast, you and Linear Bob. Like and share, everybody. Like and share. Please, please, please.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
You got the power. You got the power. You got the power.
Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show on WCPT, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station. I'm Santita Jackson. It's a joy to be with you today on Thursday, September 30th. Wow. Wow. What is going on? Where has the year gone, everybody? 2021. Where has the year gone? I mean, October is just about here. Everybody, let's talk today about Gabby Petito and Brian Landry and how that case has been handled. What do you think about that? And many people have talked about the missing white woman syndrome. And indeed, Gabby Petito's parents, for their portion, said, while we wanted to find our child and we'd hoped to find her alive, and we appreciated the support that we got from media and other authorities, Other people should get this attention too. That was very, very big of them. Very, very big of them. And we thank them in their grief for being that big. But there's a lot. Why did the police give them that much space? There's a lot to think about, everybody. And then, of course, we're going to be talking about this debt ceiling. How does it impact you? I mean, many of us are talking about the $1 trillion infrastructure package, the $3.5 trillion infrastructure package, but how does it impact you? How does America defaulting on its debt impact you? Bacon is already at record prices. We've never seen bacon cost this much, for example. Of course, I love bacon, but a lot of us do. But food prices are rising. There's a lot going on. Dr. Max Wolf will talk with us about that. And of course, we'll be talking about our health with Dr. Deborah Holden and getting some good news from the good Reverend, the pastor of the Grace Central Church, Darius Brooks. Everybody, let's get to some of these headlines so we can get to the rest of the Santita Jackson Show. Chicago, we will have a high of 74 degrees, partly cloudy. Scattered thunderstorms in Minneapolis, St. Paul. At 81 degrees will be the high, everybody. The Twins were triumphant over the Tigers 5-2. And guess what? White Sox playoff tickets went on sale yesterday. Go on and snap them up, everybody. Can you believe it? This is fantastic. And the Jaguars will be facing off against the Bengals tonight in the NFL. Yes, it's that time of year. I love it, love it, love it, everybody. Today is the last day for Congress to get some sort of stopgap bill in order to avoid a government shutdown at midnight. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said last night that a deal had been reached in both the Senate and the House. Will likely vote on a continuing resolution today to keep the government funded at current levels, while both chambers are expected to approve the measure. There's no room for error. We will see what is going to happen there, everybody. The CDC is seriously urging pregnant Americans now, pregnant women, and those who have recently given birth to get vaccinated against COVID-19. Only 31% of pregnant women have been vaccinated, according to CDC data. And thousands of pregnant women and new mothers have ended up in the hospital because of the virus. Overall, however, the number of COVID-19 deaths and hospitalizations are projected to decrease over the next 4 weeks. And the first anticipated decline since June. United Airlines says that they have 99% of their employees vaccinated. Now, they've had more than 2,500 quit or be fired. So that will be very, very interesting. But they said in August that they would require 67,000 U.S. workers to be vaccinated for COVID-19. And now 99% of them are. What do you think about that? Were they coerced? Do you think that's a good thing? And will they start requiring people who ride on the planes, passengers, to be vaccinated? And will you still have to present proof of being COVID-19 negative, even as people have been vaccinated? It'll be interesting to see. The NBA is going to dock pay for missed games related to local COVID-19 mandates. Unvaccinated NBA players in New York City and San Francisco will not be paid for missed games resulting from local COVID-19 vaccine mandates that prevent them from playing, according to the league. League spokesman said any player who elects not to comply with local vaccination mandates will not be paid for games that he misses. What do you think about that? Call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. If you text me, GWC Entry Lawyers gives you that opportunity. But what do you think about that, everybody? A new Supreme Court term starts on Monday, and it will see the 9 justices take the bench in person for the first time in over a year. The term is already set for a tumultuous start after the court's recent 5-4 vote, allowing a controversial Texas abortion law to go into effect. Since then, some justices have had to defend the court from accusations of politicizing decisions. Others, including Justice Sonia Sotomayor, have openly expressed frustration with the case. So we will see how all of this goes. Some 4,600 Haitians have been removed from the United States since the government started repatriation flights last week from Texas to Haiti to alleviate a massive migrant camp at the southern U.S. border. Since then, the Department of Homeland Security has conducted 43 such flights. The last remaining migrants left the border on Friday, and those who weren't returned to Haiti either returned back at the border or were moved to U.S. Customs and Border Protection processing centers or were released into the United States. We're going to be talking about that next week because I want to know where they are, everybody. There's a new report that exposes corporate schemes to derail the Biden agenda and to upend democracy. It's called Behind the Curtain, everybody, the corporate plot to upend democracy. It's a new report by People's Action. It's a nationwide network of groups organizing for social justice. And Demos, a progressive think tank. They said, while everyday people are calling on Congress to put people first and safeguard these basic rights, our basic rights for housing, healthcare, and clean environment, corporations are prioritizing profits and working hard to preserve an inequitable status quo. You want to understand Senator Sinema and Manchin, we need to read that report. And I promise you, we're going to dig down at it because we now are seeing corporate Democrats who are obstructing the extension of the child tax credit, which is in the $3.5 trillion infrastructure bill. And that's Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema and multimillionaire Congressman Josh Gottheimer from New Jersey, multimillionaire Congressperson Carolyn Bordeaux from Georgia, and on and on and on. We need to know the names and you need to call them out. Alabama GOP is being condemned for a plan to build prisons with COVID-19 funds. And that kind of wraps it up today. I've got more things I can share with you. I just kind of want to give you the temperature of what's happening in the world today. Hey, Pastor Darius Brooks of Grace Central Church. That's right. Always so glad out in Westchester. Always so glad to be with you. So blessed to be with you. Your will is what's best for me. Yes, it's that, Darius Brooks, everybody.
I'll shout right here. Here.
Come on now.
Right here.
Oh, we need some good news. I'm always so glad. You're always, you know what, no matter what's going on with you, you have got a fire, something inside so strong that just burns so bright. And I just thank God for you and your spirit. Give us some good news today.
Well, the first thing I want to share with you is whatever advice you get, it better align with Scripture, because if it doesn't, it's a mixture, and God don't live there. Today's message is amazing. The still #1 best-selling book in the world, Santita, is the Bible. You can put that down where you want it. You don't have to believe it, but it's true, and you don't have to trust it, but it works.
Okay, I like that.
That's my joy. It's the best-selling book to this very day, the Bible. No book has ever outsold this book. Do your research, do your homework. And today's message is Isaiah 43:19. I love the title of your show, Where Facts Matter. I love that, Santita. And you're talking about the 67,000 people that need the Americans to be vaccinated. Watch this scripture today. God rewards the faithful, but he doesn't do well with the wicked. In other words, everybody has an outcome. Watch this. Isaiah 43:19 says, forget the former things, or whenever you see this in the word of God, Santita, things, he's talking about thoughts. You got to rightly divide God's word. He says, forget the former thoughts. Do not dwell on the past. He says, see, I am doing a new thing. Watch this, or a new thought. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland. Girl, listen, if I had to use for a thought today, I want to use a spanking brand new view. A spanking brand new view. So that's what we're looking at, everybody, whether we like it or not. Everyday living is designed to bring us choices for opportunity. We are always bombarded with theories and opinions, and the worst ones comes from ourselves. We think doing something new will produce something different. Unfortunately, until you master a thing, it will repeat itself to you, and you'll find yourself hurt again and broken again. And you got to be careful here, Santita, because when you're broken, you often contribute to the brokenness of others, which is why often when we're sad, we go to other people to agree with us. Listen to me. And they'll agree with us because they're experiencing the same kind of thing. But being consistent in and through God's word is what we get to a place of peace. When things that was whole look like it's been reduced to dust, the enemy and even our living tries to make us think that the promises of God, listen, no longer exist in our lives or apply to us, or make us think God and his reach falls short of where we are. Santita, I'm about to run. New does not start outside anything. New starts on the inside of everything. We often ask God to fix things, repair some stuff. And some even believe that God will edit the story. But people of God, I came to tell you today, when in fact, God is preparing something spanking, brand new with a view. And I'm closing with this. Yeah, when you are lost, unmotivated, unclear, or even if you get confused, go back to the tools that can only be used for a win that God has designed for you. Don't wait too long to grab a hold of God's spanking brand new view for you. And whatever you do, or whatever advice you get, make sure it aligns with Scripture. Because if it doesn't, it's a mixture. It's already here. You got to embrace and trust God with a spanking brand new view.
Amen, amen, amen. Every day, every moment, you get a chance to recreate, to be spanking brand new. You are worshiping in person. Where can we see you on Sunday and at what time?
Great Central Church. You can go on Facebook. You can go on YouTube. And Santita, I'm not building a big church. I'm building a big people this time around. Yeah. So I'm not, and it's an honest statement. It's no hidden agenda. I'm not building a big church. I'm building big people this time around. Because Santita, I'm listening to your show. I listen to you, girl. Listen, and I share it, and I like it, and I want people to hear this information. But there's a lot of people in church that's not. There's no peace. They don't believe God is doing something. And I've just said that it'll make us think that God is not working, when in fact, he's doing new things. Santita, I was thinking about you this morning. If you went to Alabama and God gave you a whole new life and you met another friend as a musician, can you handle a spanking brand new view?
Yes, because I'm open now. But most of us cannot, and I've been in places where I couldn't. But absolutely, because you've got to be open. You've got to be open. Now, what's your address? The church's address, because I want people to hear more of this.
Okay, Great Central Church, 10216 South Kitchener Street, Westchester, Illinois. You can go to us on YouTube, find Great Central Church on YouTube and Facebook, or you can go to my name and it will take you straight there to Grace Central Church, 10216 South Kitchener Street, Westchester, Illinois. Just embrace that spanking brand new view. It's a view, Santita. We got to see it.
I love Darius Brooks. That's right. Your will is what's best for me. The Tommies. Yep. That one. That's who I've got here. You know what? I've got Dr. Deborah Furholden, Glamour of India, of course. She's the Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University, coming out of Johns Hopkins University. We're so excited to have you with us every morning. There is just so much to unpack with the mandates. We're seeing them go forward. Let me ask you this. As we go forward, because now United Airlines is saying 99% of our employees, and I would say the employees they have left, because some were fired, some quit, and some have been put to the side in advance of maybe a firing if they refuse to get vaccinated. What should they do? Should they still have COVID-19 testing, even although they are 99% vaccinated? Or should they, what should their behavior be going forward?
Yeah, that's a good question, and good morning.
Good morning, always.
They have to continue. Remember, I've never wavered in this. Testing is a function of exposure. If you are going to work every day, Monday through Friday, you need to be tested once a week. I just fundamentally believe that everybody needs to be tested, and we've got the test now. We've got technology to test what's called pooled sampling. It's a very inexpensive method where you pool samples and you run a PCR on a whole batch. And if the whole batch is negative, everybody in the batch is negative. If the whole batch is positive, then you got to rerun it on a smaller subset until you identify what's positive in the batch. It's what we use at our university and what a lot of places are using for student testing, right? You know, we've got 25,000 students, 30,000 students. That's a heavy lift. And we are able to do this and use our own facilities even to run the test. So there's all kinds of tests now that exist that will facilitate this. But yeah, it's not just about whether or not you're vaccinated. The most important factor is, are you an active case in shedding virus? That's the most important thing, and that's the thing that we need to know. So yeah, they need to have still have testing protocols in place. Everybody does.
But you know, Dr. Verholden, I'm not hearing anyone discuss that. And so, because
Yeah.
it's not being discussed, I'm concerned about United's employees and other employees being who are being pulled into the workplace, who are responding to the corporate mandates for the vaccines. I'm not hearing the discussion about whether you have COVID-19 or not, whether they're having testing, and I'm wondering just how safe that is. I mean, is that going to have, are we going to have a safe work environment if we're not doing adequate testing? Like once a week, should the United employees, just as an example, once a week, should they all be getting the test? And if so, which test should they get? Should they get the rapid test or should they get the PCR test? Or is there another test they should be taking?
Yeah, so we call it cadence testing, right? And think of like cadence, like the beat or the rhythm, like in music. It should go with the rhythm of how you move about in the world. So, like I said, if you're going to work every day, you should be tested every week. And it's again also a function of exposure. Flight attendants are surrounded by people all the time in confined spaces. Like, I mean, this is like the exact kind of environment that viruses like this will spread, and a lot of people will get infected. You've got even one positive person on that plane. Think of the example with the teacher who took the mask off to do story time for the kids, and then you look at which kids contracted COVID. All the kids in the front row, about half the kids in the second row, and a few kids in the last row. A flight attendant is moving about the plane, interacting with, oftentimes, depending on the size of the plane, it could be every human being, on the plane. So if you're on a plane and you're sitting next to somebody who's COVID positive, or you're in the row, right next to there, your risk of exposure is greater. If you're the flight attendant, your risk of exposure to everyone is high because you're moving about. So not only are they working, but they're in a high exposure risk because they're coming into close contact with a lot of people each day. And they then become what we call a vector. A vector. So they'll be exposed to people on one flight, and then they'll potentially expose others on the next flight.
And
So,
can you
they
properly
need to be,
sanitize these
tested
planes?
regularly.
I mean, is it possible, because planes have quick turnarounds?
They sure do. They sure do. I don't know what the sanitation protocol is for planes, but I can imagine to truly sanitize them. That would seemingly take some time and some human resources. And a lot of those planes hit the ground. I mean, have you ever gotten on a plane and there been trash in the seat pocket, or some trash on the floor? It's happened to me, more times than a few. So, I can't imagine, the work that it would take to wipe everything down and get rid of all the trash and all of that. Sometimes the turnaround times for when those planes land, so when they've got to start boarding the next one, it's 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And the last time I flew, oh, man, I was like, all the protocols are out the window now. Every seat is occupied. Every seat is occupied, and we're just seeing more and more of the bickering and the aggression and violence.
Well, because it's so uneven.
Other passengers around masking.
Well, but it's around the unevenness, because I don't hear. I'm glad I heard from the CEO of United yesterday, but I wanted to hear from an epidemiologist. I wanted to hear from an infection preventionist. You know, who helped to put these protocols? I mean, what protocols do you all have? Because you're just telling me about a vaccine. You're not telling me, because now I know with the vaccine, I still need to mask. I still need to hand sanitize. I still need to be physically distanced from people. And none of that's happening. None of that's happening. So I've got literally 30 seconds. As what do we do? What what should you be involved in the policy discussion? Just 30 seconds.
100%. And it's time to really like lean toward the experts. I know that, some of these decisions are business decisions, some are political decisions, but this notion of follow the science, it can't be when it's convenient. It can't be follow the science when it's convenient, when it works for you, when it doesn't impact your business or won't, impact you at the polls. If that's what we're going to do, then that's what we have to do, even when it's unpopular or not profitable. And so I think the same way airlines have a right to require you to, mask and answer these questions, and eventually they might require you to present a negative test that international flights do.
Sure.
We
Absolutely.
should have requirements on them. People should ask, what are your protocols?
And you know what?
What are the airline protocols? We should want to know.
That's right. And when you call and get your reservation, and however you do it, you need to be asking that question, because while they are being praised for having 99% of their employees vaccinated, I think they need to go another step. They need to tell us what their safety protocols are. I don't know what they are. Dr. Deborah Furholden, Michigan State University, Associate Dean of Public Health. We're so proud of this woman coming out of Johns Hopkins University at the age of 24 with her PhD, and now the medical school at Michigan State University said, we need you to build the School of Public Health for us. We just love you. Excuse me, India's glamour. That's what she's known as. With the Morning Stars, let's talk about Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie. In that case, ooh, and on the Santita Jackson Show, just a few minutes. Wow. You know what? I just, I saw that, and it just came to me because I was going to ask you about something else. I was going to go back into what we talked about. But I have to tell you, I was so disturbed when I saw him yesterday, and I thought about the people who've lost their jobs. And I said, okay, I know you mean well, but what are you doing to keep people safe? I mean, for real. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, this is not enough. What you all are doing, people are still getting it. Oh, man. Look, y'all, I think I've got COVID fatigue, because I would tell you, my family and I have been through it, and it's not just me. I mean, everybody's going through it. So don't get me wrong. I'm not sitting up here saying, oh, I've done something you haven't done. It's just it's stressful. It's stressful.
Yeah.
Even trying to get protocols in my parents' home. Like, wait a minute. Because people now meet them in the carport, which is where my mother has chairs and whatnot set up, and she's like, oh, well, they can just come. No, Mom. And my mother's very, very, very careful. But it's like, no, you didn't see you. We saw you. Frightened me to death. So I need you to be careful. We all do. So everybody's calling every day. Who's been by the house? Who's coming over? I said, we've got to, and now Vice President Harris's office, they're upset with the View, and they should be. They're like, wait a minute, you all were supposed to have taken a PCR test 24 hours in advance of her visit. Clearly, you didn't do that. How does that work? How do you do that? This is the Vice President of the United States. Are you for real? Nope. Nope.
It's why we are where we are. I saw this really great story this morning on the news comparing Australia to Florida. And it's interesting because they're very close in population. I think Florida is bigger. One is 21 million, one is 25 million.
Okay.
And Australia has had just over 1,250 total deaths, COVID deaths, the whole pandemic. And Florida at one point was averaging that a day. They've had almost 55,000 deaths compared to 1,250. It's just, and the things that the governor is doing and saying.
I mean, oh,
You
look.
have Attorney Connolly. Patillo hasn't picked up yet, and
Okay.
Hoffler just needs a minute.
Okay, well, try either of the, I'm sorry, hold on one moment, Deborah. Try either of those numbers, particularly the office number.
Okay.
He could be there as well. That's why I gave you both numbers, okay?
Thank you.
No, thank you. Well, Doctor, would you like to weigh in on the Petito case?
Oh, no.
Coming back in time.
No. I'll say something bad.
That's how I feel. That's how I feel. Love you much, girl. I'm coming up in 10 seconds.
Okay.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
You got the power. You got the power. You got the power.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show, a story that's been in the headlines, and so much happened last week. Santita Jackson Show, WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I want you to call me at 773-763-9278. 773-763. WCPT 773-763-9278. I want to know what your thoughts are about the Gabby Petito case and Brian Laundrie and his family and their behavior and the behavior of the FBI and the police. There's a whole lot that's going on. Remember, it was not Brian Laundrie and Gabby Petito lived together in Brian Landry's family home. So when they went out on this social media tour, and he came back home without her. Her parents reported her missing. Brian Laundrie, did not report her missing. His parents did not report her missing. Her parents asked her parents and him, help us to find her. They refused. They met with the lawyers. What happened here? How is it that Brian Laundrie was given so much space that he could escape pretty much? So I just want to know, I want us to take this down because last week we were talking about Haiti, and it's not that I did not care about this case. Clearly, I followed it. It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to think that Jelani Day got no press as his body laid in the morgue unidentified for weeks while his mother's begging for some just 5 seconds of attention. Wow. So we got a lot to talk about. So I said, let us unpack this with our legal eagles. Of course, we've got attorney Erin Connolly, brilliant women's rights activist, human rights activist, and political consultant, and attorney Erin Connolly and attorney C.K. Hoffler, who is the immediate past president of the National Bar Association, which is the largest and oldest black bar association in the world, and the chair of Rainbow Push, in addition to being a great lawyer, attorney herself. Let me start with you, attorney C.K. Hoffler. Help set the table for us with this particular story, because it's a whole lot to unpack. I mean, and I was so moved, if I may say, by Gabby Petito's family saying that, I want to thank all of you for giving this case so much attention. But there's so many other people who've not gotten attention. And I thought they were tipping their hat to all of the black and brown people who don't get a fraction of the attention that we showered upon this case, and we should have. There's a whole lot that went wrong here. I mean, just on a human level. But part of the human experience is racism, is sexism, it's all the isms. And so we have to bring all this stuff in so we can get this stuff right. Okay, everybody, so I want to hear your thoughts about this case. 773-763-9278, 763-WCPT. Starting with you, Attorney C.K. Hoffler. What are we looking at?
Good morning, Santita.
Thank you.
What we're looking at on so many levels, and also to this wonderful panel and to the audience, on so many levels, we're looking at layers of loopholes within our criminal justice system. And I say that because in some instances, for some individuals who have the means and who have access to superior legal counsel, they are able to obfuscate or to get around the rules, that most people would have to abide by when there is a missing person and when there's a person of interest. So let me unpack this case. You have a couple that was engaged and they were going on a trip, across country, and they're social media people. So Gabby wanted to be able to chronicle her journey. And they at some point get into a fight, not just an altercation, not just a verbal fight, but there's physicality. Law enforcement is called to the scene. There's evidence of a physical fight. And this is where you have disparities in how law enforcement treat certain situations. At that point, for certain, when law enforcement comes on the scene and people have been fighting and there's physical evidence of a fight, someone's getting arrested. In our criminal justice system throughout the country, in most instances, and for certain if you're a Black and brown person, someone would get arrested. Why? Because there's evidence that there's an altercation that has escalated to a point of violence, assault, and battery, and could go further. But that's not what happened. So they're allowed to kind of cool off. And Brian is able to, at that point, just pivot and go cool off. Gabby, we're not so sure what happens to her. And then sometime later, within days, Brian comes back home in their van without Gabby and refuses to talk to the parents about it. Another miscarriage of justice. Her parents declare her a missing person because they stopped having communication with her at the end of August. So they declare her a missing person. He comes back home and refuses to share details about what happened to her, and he's lawyered up immediately. And for a period of days, while they're seeking to find her, to locate where this child is, where their child is, unsuccessfully, he is able to really, on his own recognizance, he's not arrested, he's not really questioned in the way that you would expect, and he's able to really go off and find himself, not cooperating, giving statements, not doing much. And as a result of that, valuable evidence, and that's why I say a miscarriage of justice. There's valuable evidence that is going cold and that's being lost in the system. And this young woman is not found, can't be found.
Well, hold on. Let me ask you this, because I want to know if it's odd to you. Gabby Petito lived with Brian Laundrie and his family in the family home. He returns home in her van without her. When her parents called to find out where she was, because they said she's never out of touch, the parents presented lawyers to them. And it was her parents, not his parents, with whom Gabby lived. It was her parents, with whom she did not live, who had to report her missing. How does that sound to you, CK?
It sounds completely fishy, just to put it bluntly.
Okay.
And if it weren't for the fact that there's a young woman who's now dead, it would be, I would call it more than fishy. It was tragic. Again, I'm using the word miscarriage of justice because we see it a lot. Miscarriage of justice. And while she's not, and I think it is important to note that her parents are the ones that do the inquiry, not him. And he still is not cooperating with details and what happened. But I think what's most amazing is he's allowed to go freely, usually when you have a situation like this, there's an investigation.
Okay.
They ask the person of interest, or when they're inquiring, look, don't leave the jurisdiction. We don't want you to, if you could just stay in place because we're trying to uncover what happened to Gabby. That didn't happen. But what did happen is he got lawyered up, and he had very good lawyers.
Oh, wait, and hold on. And this is also what happened, CK. I mean, I'm just jumping in because this is the more I read about it.
Yeah,
I just said, this is so. He and his parents went on a camping trip.
Yes.
I said, no, wait a minute. You just left the camping trip. What? Two of them.
And
well,
yes, it is not. And Santita, you're struggling with it because we all should be struggling with it. It's the inexplicable, and I call it a miscarriage of justice, because at that point the police know there's a missing person. They suspect she's dead. They are searching for her. Her parents, her family is frantic, but he, the only person, potentially the last person to see her alive, is allowed to freely go where he wants, do what he wants, while every single minute, every day, the evidence is growing stale. And they're on a witch hunt to find her. And they have a lot of place to cover. They've got a lot of space to cover because she could literally be anywhere because they were driving. So she could have been anywhere between Florida, Wyoming, anywhere in the Midwest, and they have no idea, and they're putting together pieces of the puzzle. So what is improper in my impression was how at the scene of the accident, where law enforcement didn't take a different measure, not to just separate them and give them a cooling off period, but to intervene in a more significant way. Because when you have violence, this is not, and I know that there's some, people often talk about, well, if it's a domestic situation, the law enforcement should not get involved. When there's violence, as there was here, that's when law enforcement should get involved, because there was violence that had escalated. There were witnesses. They didn't. That was the problem, the first problem that I had with this. Another problem that when Brian came home alone, the time that it took for information, for law enforcement to secure information from him, basic information. And there are a lot of things that the district attorneys that could have done, or even attorney generals could have done, because she was a missing person. They suspected foul play. And so I think the wheels of justice were turning slowly because Brian and his family were able to stall, were able to get their ducks in a row, so that and then he just went out of town, disappeared, left his cell phone. Nobody could reach him. He's finding himself discovering what he's doing is he's planning his defense, in my humble impression. And then Gabby's body is found. And now everybody's scurrying around. So, Santita, to begin to draw the parallels at the same time of a missing young Black man who had a life full of promise, and the lack of media attention, there was a miscarriage of justice in Gabby's case. There was no justice. At the same time, in the case involving a young Black man who disappeared, who had a stellar career and was going on to medical school.
Jelani Day.
His mother was begging, Jelani Day, we need to call his name. His mother was begging and pleading for any level of cooperation. So let's understand, no one was cooperating with her. The medical examiner made it seem as though, well, I'll get to it when I get to it. Law enforcement, well, we have a lot on our plate now. All of the resources, mainstream media were simply not interested in her story. They were not interested in the disappearance of a young Black man, but they were interested in the disappearance of Gabby Petito. And let me just say this. Nothing that I'm saying takes away from the fact that Gabby's family was traumatized.
Absolutely.
Just like Jelani's family was traumatized. Both families were traumatized. But it does demonstrate the inequities in our criminal justice system once again, and why there's a need for policing reform. There should not be 55 different sets of rules. One in Wyoming, one in Florida, one in Boston, one in Ohio. One set of rules, uniformity of how cases are investigated. This is an apples to apples comparison. And that's why it demonstrates the inequities and the disparities in the racial disparities
Absolutely.
in our system of justice. And Jelani's mother is to this day wondering, still has questions. And so it's both, I believe both families are victims.
Well,
Both
you're
families
looking
are
for a
victims.
body. You're looking for Jelani. There is a body that was found not too far from his car, and it didn't get identified for weeks. I mean, are you serious? I mean,
Weeks.
really? No,
Because
nobody.
he wasn't a priority. He was not a priority. He was not a priority.
Well, you know, and
So
you know,
that's
and
the
you know what's
disparity.
worse? Because he didn't matter. He didn't matter. That's what's so
He simply
ugly.
didn't matter.
That's what. But you know, let me bring in.
That's the table.
Oh, no, because it's a lot. Attorney Aaron Connolly. Where do you see all of this? Because these cases are so disturbing. But when I look at what's happened with Gabby Petito, it's like the space that his family have been given. I mean, I said, wait a minute. When I found out, I said, wait a minute. You all did not report missing a young woman who lived with you. It was her parents who lived across the country. Who are you? Attorney Connolly.
Well, good morning, Santita, and good morning, Attorney C.K. Hoffler. Thank you for letting me be a part of this important conversation. I think with the Gabby Petito case, I think it captured the attention of so many in this country because for women, at least, when you saw that video of her speaking to police after the altercation, after there was a physical altercation between them, and you see her apologizing and taking responsibility. Any woman that has known a woman in an abusive relationship saw their friend, their family member in Gabby Petito in that moment. And the thing that's troubling about it for me is that law enforcement did not recognize those signs. And they're classic signs. They're classic ways that women apologize for being hit, that don't want their partner, no matter what happens, to get in trouble, where the woman is the one who is accused of having a mental breakdown or some sort of hysterical moment instead of the reality that there is a manipulative, dangerous man controlling parts of her life and she doesn't feel safe. The fact that they were not separated and interviewed separately, that they were not taken into custody and interviewed to make sure that she feels safe, that there wasn't a mental health counselor on staff to be called in and make sure that she isn't having, if the truth was she was having a mental health crisis, why wasn't she provided resources and help to deal with that? Why wasn't she evaluated by a medical physician to make sure she, had all of her faculties and was able to make decisions later after they had a quote unquote cool off period? So that video, I think, is the most striking piece from a law enforcement perspective, where that's the time where lives can be saved, especially when a third party was the one to alert the authorities about this violence, right? Mm-hmm. Gabby did not call the police. Her fiance did not call the police. This was third parties that saw that there was violence occurring and the police were required to intervene. Now, this happens every day in the United States, and women go missing every day in the United States. We saw this case amplify the number of missing and murdered Indigenous women throughout Wyoming and the entire Southwest, right? And Gabby's family has also recognized that there is a disparity in
press coverage.
Coverage as well, right? And then we look at the case of Jelani Day, which is, as TK said, there is no justice there. Thinking about your son not being important enough to be identified when he has been found already. He was found, and they're not doing due diligence. So I think the entire system needs a better way to communicate with the other municipalities that are investigating these pieces. But also, if you are the last person to see a missing person alive and you have their vehicle and their phone and are using their debit card, you at the very least need to be interviewed by police when you return.
Well, why wasn't
he? You should
he?
not have days to go camping. You should not have.
Why wasn't he?
to meet with counsel and have a lawyer present in that process. That is part of our system, and that is an important part of our system.
Why
No one's
wasn't
saying
he
that.
interviewed?
But
Well, no, I mean,
because
it
he
helped me
has
with that. I'm not a lawyer.
He has.
Just, this is crazy.
It is crazy. It's, and I hope that this system changes. And unfortunately, this poor girl was killed, and thank God was found because of this attention. And her family will know some level of peace that they found her and she's not out there missing, right? The legacy of Gabby Petito, I hope, will be justice for the person who murdered her, and also changes to our system that lets young women in particular disappear and their justice just start fading away with the days and weeks, that precious time where people can be investigating, having those interviews. As CK knows, the first 48 hours are crucial to gather that information and interview folks to make sure they have all of the facts, that their stories match up, that you can find leads in that amount of time. That evidence is disappearing. And we as a nation have some power in this, as we saw. Putting that attention, the online obsession with that case was a big reason why law enforcement put so much energy into it. But we have to demand a greater justice and not just find one person. We have to make all of these women and men a priority. The media, thank you, Santita, for covering issues like this, but the rest of, especially the cable news media, picks their cases and ignores all of the others. And those people matter too. Their families deserve justice. They deserve a system where they're investigated with due process. We have a right to due process in this country, and these victims are not receiving it.
You know, it's stunning, but I think we can't ignore the elephant in the room. This is privilege, white privilege. He was given a lot of space by his police department because this is a nice family. These people are like me. You know, let's just work this out. Work what out? This girl's missing. Work what out? This young man is behaving in a violent way. Maybe it was episodic. Maybe this was part of his story. But I'm just trying to figure out how it is that the police, the local police and the FBI, who got involved right early, how they gave him so much space that CK, Aaron, they went camping after the girl was missing. Wait a minute, you all just left a camping trip. So your parents go back out with you to do 2 camping trips? That's CK. Come on. What?
And it smells. It smells, Santita. There's not, sometimes we seek to make sense of something that makes no sense, and that will never make sense. To find an explanation to something that's inexplicable. And I think there's so much that we're missing in this narrative. There's so much. And we're missing it because evidence is cold now. It's getting colder and colder and colder on this case. Connecting the dots, there's going to be a case. There's going to be a trial. He's going to be charged. If they find him, he's able to stand trial. But the evidence, in any case, you have to be able to have evidence and prove, especially in a criminal case like this. And the connecting of the dots could have happened right away, didn't happen because he was able to manipulate the process. And that's what is most unfortunate. Manipulate the process. Now, let me just say one thing. In our system, criminal justice system, everyone has a right to representation. You can choose counsel of your choice, but a lot of people can't afford representation, and a lot of those people are in jail. Under other circumstances, there are people that are in jail right now where their similar circumstances are not even as egregious as this, but they did not have the resources to get an attorney, so they're in jail. The police just arrested them and said, we'll just figure it out when we figure it out. That didn't happen with Brian because he was able to manipulate the system because he had access to counsel. I bet dollars to donuts, when they subpoena his records, his family were talking to legal counsel. That's his right. I'm talking about right there when the malfeasance happened. He's talking to legal counsel before he even gets to Florida. His journey back to Florida appeared to me to be very staged, very methodical. And then his disappearance to go camping. His disappearance to go camping with his family, again, something to me that's very staged, and it reeks of just manipulation of the legal system. And the result, a lot of times, is injustice. In the meantime, on the same page, in the same story, Gabby Petito's parents are desperately trying to find their daughter.
And they
ultimately,
refuse.
Her body is.
They refuse to help her. You know, stay right there because we're gonna bring up some more of these issues on the other side of the break. We'll be talking about the debt ceiling on the bottom of the next hour. But what do you make of what you've heard? What do you make, everybody? What do you make of this? Because Robert Williams, you said this girl reported missing and he has possession of her vehicle. What more probable cause do you need? I'm hearing you. So, and Jewel, you said they should have stayed on top of his. I heard that because I'm wondering about the parents that, hey, my parents would have said, well, where is your fiance? It's just common human decency. Where is she? Son, where is she? Where is she? So who are you? You didn't ask where this child was. And when her parents call, you give the parents to the lawyers. Hold on. Come on now. Stanley, I'm with you. Come on. Can we talk here? I'm hearing this. This is, The police gave him some space that they would not give to anybody else. And you know it. Call me on the Santita Jackson Show. Let's talk about it. Back in just a minute. Jewel, it is outrageous. This is crazy. I mean, Aaron and CK, whoo. And remember, the next segment ends at 27, okay? Because I have to be out by 28, okay? CK? Okay. So I'm going to let you all get into it. But I mean, the more that I just kind of pulled all the pieces together, this is so disturbing. Oh my gosh, this is so disturbing. And the fact that the police gave him all this, and his parents, that they gave this family all this space. White privilege is in it. I hear you, Stanley. And but it's, you know what? It's all wrong. White, black, brown, yellow, red, brown. I mean, it's not, black people are not going to be given that space. Absolutely. But this is just somebody with somebody. Call this wrong. Just say it's wrong. You all did not treat this, and I can only imagine what she was living in with his family. I just, no, help me with it.
Well, and that's the other disturbing thing. The system that won't help her. Like, clearly these people did not have her best interest, or they would be making statements to the press. They would be out searching for her. The behavior is off from the very beginning, and that should trigger law enforcement to do more, not less, right? Like,
well, you know what? But see, you still have the Leave It to Beaver, perfect white family. Okay, that's what we're dealing with too, and these people are disturbed. But the sad thing is, their normativeness, their normalcy has been elevated to be the standard. I mean, it's just like the boys in Columbine. They walked around exhibiting antisocial behavior for at least a year. But because they were from both affluent white families. Well, you know, they're from nice families. No, they're from families with money. They could be just as messed up as they can be. Black, white, brown, yellow, red, privilege, and can mess everybody up. Okay, so you know they've been given space. They've been given space, and I think, and no one is examining the space that was given to this family and why. You know, they wanted to know if, I mean, I know when they saw Jelani Day, they saw a gangbanger. They didn't see a 25-year-old graduate student at Illinois State University who was going to be a doctor, who has a sister who was also going to be a doctor, and they were in a competition to be who was going to become a doctor first, making their mother so proud. They didn't see that. They saw an N-word. Put it right there. This is horrible. And then you just saw some helpless girl. Gabby was a woman. And somebody should have pulled this joker who was seen slapping her in that van. Somebody should have put him in custody. Don't let him cool off at a bar. Let him see some bars.
Right. I'm just wondering when there's evidence that someone physically violated a man, physically violated a woman, under what system is it ever okay, and is that person not arrested? That's right there. That's the first thing that's astonishing. And I think, and so that it starts there, and from there it just gets worse and worse. And Brian is able to manipulate the system. There's no question in my mind, no doubt. He probably told his parents what happened. His parents they did what they felt was best for their child, which was to lawyer up because they knew that he was, one, going to be a person of suspicion, or two, had engaged in criminal activity, or at a minimum by beating her, or three, murdered her. So his parents knew. They did exactly what our system allows them to do. Maybe it was callous, maybe it was unfeeling, maybe it was manipulative, but they did what our system allows them to do. Law enforcement didn't do what they should have done. And there's some great law enforcement, but these law enforcement at the scene of the incident with evidence didn't do what they were supposed to do, in my impression. In Florida, all that was not, all of the activities surrounding the investigation and all of that in Florida, to me, was not handled appropriately.
Hey, I'm trying to figure out who these people are, who the family are. I mean, this is like, you mean to tell me you excuse your son doing someone wrong? That I don't understand that. These parents.
Well, and is this family just having regular privilege because of their appearance and status, or are they connected with police in some way that we don't know about? Right?
Well, you know,
are they
that's
getting additional considerations
that we don't know about, and that's not been reported. See, they report all
Right.
kinds of stuff.
The media hasn't been able to question them.
Well, haven't been able to question them, but they dig. They know how to make your life a living hell. Trust me. Okay? They can dig up all kinds of stuff on you. Senator Obama, State Senator Obama, was running for the U.S. Senate. His two biggest candidates, the two candidates who gave him the hardest time, who would have been the biggest threats to him, their divorce records, which had been sealed, mysteriously appeared in the newspapers here with some really embarrassing details. Okay? When these folks decide to come in on you, the media, they can do it. And when they want to protect you, they can do that too. Let's just keep it 100. What happened to this girl was a crime. What happened to Jelani was a crime. And this unevenness is what we have to begin to call out. And we have to look at his family and ask, who are you people? Who are you? That you would that you would cover this up for yourself if this indeed happened. Shame, shame, shame. Y'all went camping with him? Well, wasn't he tired of the woods? He'd been out in the woods for since June?
15.
So anyway, we're going to continue. I want to hear from you, everybody. Call me at 763-9278. I want to hear what your thoughts are, because, we are tired of it. This is not tired of it. I want to hear your thoughts.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. It's Thursday, September 30th, 2021. I'm coming to you from WCPT, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. We're talking about the Gabby Petito case. What do you make of all of this? all of this, the behavior of Brian Laundrie's family, the fact that we cannot find him, police gave him so much space to run, and the FBI, and what happened here? Who are his parents? Why didn't they report her missing? She lived with them. Why was it left to her parents to report her missing? She did not live with him. Wow. Gotta hear from you. What are your thoughts about this? 773-763 WCPT. Oh, I printed it wrong up there. It's 773-763-9278. Someone please correct that for me. 773-763-9278. Let's get back to this case, but I'm going to get a couple of headlines out of the way. Chicago, we're going to have a high of 74 degrees, partly cloudy. Minneapolis, Minnesota, everybody, 81 degrees, scattered thunderstorms. And the Twins, well, they were triumphant over the Tigers, 5-2. The White Sox playoff tickets are on sale, everybody. I wonder if they're sold out yet. Go get your tickets right now. The Jaguars will be playing the Bengals in the NFL tonight. Today is the last day for Congress to get some sort of stopgap bill in order to avoid a government shutdown at midnight. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said last night that a deal had been reached, and both the Senate and the House will likely vote on a continuing resolution today to keep the government funded at current levels for a set time period, everybody. The CDC is seriously urging now pregnant women, and those who have recently given birth to get vaccinated against COVID-19. Only 31% of pregnant women have been vaccinated, according to CDC data, and thousands of pregnant women and new mothers have ended up in the hospital because of the virus. Overall, however, the numbers of COVID-19 deaths and hospitalizations are projected to decrease over the next 4 weeks, the first anticipated decline since June. United Airlines says that they have 99% of their employees vaccinated. Now, many have been fired and many have quit, but they now said that 67,000 U.S. workers, those who are left, are vaccinated, because now the CEO of United was on CNN last night saying that now this has been a great recruitment tool, because now people are actually trying to get jobs, because there are job openings, because some people did not get the vax, everybody. The NBA is going to dock pay for missed games related to local COVID-19 mandates, vaccine mandates. Unvaccinated NBA players in New York City and San Francisco will not be paid for missed games resulting from local COVID-19 mandates that prevent them from playing. NBA spokesman Mike Bass said any player who elects not to comply with local vaccination mandates will not be paid for games that he misses. A new Supreme Court term starts on Monday and will see the 9 justices take the bench in person for the first time in a year. The term is already set for a tumultuous start after the court's recent 5-4 decision that allowed a controversial Texas abortion law to go into effect. Since then, some justices have had to defend the court from accusations of politicizing their decisions. Others, including Justice Sonia Sotomayor, have openly expressed frustration with the case. It ought to be an exciting time and term for the Supreme Court. There's a new report called Behind the Curtain, the Corporate Plot to Upend Democracy. This is from People's Action and Demos, a progressive think tank. What they have discovered is the corporate plan to derail the Biden agenda, everybody. Corporations are threatened by the prospect of paying a slightly higher tax rate and exercising a little less power over working people. And so they're spending millions to sabotage the far-reaching Democratic reconciliation bill. So if you are trying to figure out Kirsten Sinema, and Joe Manchin, we're going to have to get the people from the report on this show to talk about it. Now, the Alabama GOP is being condemned for a plan to build prisons with their COVID-19 funds. Oh, yes, you did hear me. Local activists in Montgomery were joined by rights activists across the country on Wednesday in condemning the Republican governor of Alabama, Kay Ivey, her plan to use federal coronavirus relief funds to build 3 new prisons in the state, what the governor calls an Alabama solution to this Alabama problem of overcrowding. More of the Santita Jackson Show and these headlines. I'm going to start just posting them all on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. I want you to meet the Santita Jackson Morning Stars. Everybody like and share the Santita Jackson Morning Stars on the Santita Jackson and Friends page, and of course on my YouTube page, The Santita Jackson Show. And let's continue talking with attorney C.K. Hoffler and attorney Aaron Connolly about the Gabby Petito case. Just very quickly, for those who might have missed this on the other side of the break, very quickly, in about a minute or so, if you could just kind of set the table for us with this case, C.K. Hoffler, and then you, Attorney Connolly. Attorney Hoffler?
Yes, Santita, good morning again. This is a case that I would characterize as a miscarriage of justice, where you had a young woman and a young man who were engaged, who were traveling across country and wanted to chronicle from a social media standpoint their journey. In the course of their cross-country journey, they start fighting. They have an altercation, and the altercation does result in physical violence. There are witnesses that say he slapped her. He hit her. So there was violence in the case. The police were called. The police did right there address in their way the incident, because it was an incident. And I think the first miscarriage of justice occurred right there. There was violence. There was a physical altercation. Brian slapped, smacked, hit, committed assault and battery on Gabby. No charges were filed. No, the police, but you don't need, one party or the other doesn't need to say, I want to charge him or I'm going to charge her. The police have the ability to arrest, especially when there's violence that has escalated, one or both of the people engaged, and they usually do. That's the better side of judgment. In fact, I would submit that the standard in this case, and I did talk to a police expert, would have been immediately they would have arrested Brian because he did hit her. There was evidence of that. That didn't happen. They were allowed to just sort of, cool off, get yourself together, and continue their journey. And now, if you fast forward, Gabby is dead. Brian, after that altercation, travels back home in the van that they both were traveling in across country. He travels back home alone. Gabby isn't anywhere to be found. She's living with Brian and his parents, and her parents are inquiring as to her whereabouts because they stopped hearing from her. She was texting with them, and the last text that they got from her, they thought was a little suspicious. But anyway, they don't hear from her. They inquire about what's going on. Where is she? Brian comes back without her, and they declare her a missing person. Brian's family, neither Brian nor his family cooperate with her, with them, with the authorities. And in fact, Brian is given the full latitude and freedom to travel, to go camping with his parents. And to this day, has not been arrested. He was a person of interest. He was not properly questioned at the scene. He was not properly questioned in Florida. And his parents and he availed themselves of the, high-priced lawyers or lawyers that could help him to position him so that he can defeat any criminal charges against her. The miscarriage of justice for me was at the scene when the incident was called in, when bystanders reported, not the victim and the assailant. The bystanders reported it. The police came. That was the first miscarriage of justice. And what happened after that incident to when Gabby's body was found was just a disgrace in terms of our criminal justice system, because the evidence trail had gone cold. Immediately when there is a miscarriage of justice, when there is violence and everything that happened after that, before she was found dead, it was critical for law enforcement to be able to get information, to interview witnesses, to follow the trail. They were not able to do that because Brian manipulated the system, went home, and was given the free latitude to do whatever he wanted to do. And now Gabby Petito is dead.
With the
That's
parents,
the setting of the table.
Some people are speculating that they could be indicted by a grand jury. Is that possible? Could they be? Dave Dowling says, sounds like the parents are accessories after the fact. What is this? I mean, we're speculating, and I'm not a lawyer. I know you all don't like to speculate, but we're lay people, so we're speculating.
We're lay people. And right now it's all speculation. Even if you're a lawyer, even if you're trained, even if you do this every day, we are all speculating because we don't have the evidence, we don't have the facts. Mm-hmm. And what would go before a grand jury proceeding is, as we may know, that's a secret proceeding. So we would not be involved. There would not be cameras in there. But it appears at least there could be an argument made that his parents may have concealed or may have aided and abetted at a minimum with the obstruction of justice. Don't know that, don't have the evidence, but there are many legal theories that are floating around that could implicate the parents and Brian. But I have to tell you this. It's much bigger than the parents and Brian. There were more people involved in this saga. We just witnessed R. Kelly being convicted for a criminal enterprise, an enterprise. There is an enterprise here working at play surrounding Brian and his family that is protecting him. And while the evidence is going cold to unveil or peel back that onion because he had the benefit of time and he had the benefit to manipulate, we don't know a lot of the facts, and I hope that they do uncover a lot of the facts. And whoever is implicated should be implicated and should be held accountable.
What do you all think? 773-763-9278. 773-763-9278. As we're pulling all these little pieces together. And I mean, Aaron, you have to pull all of the pieces together because you're just getting, you're getting a little bit. No one is questioning Aaron, his family. No one's questioning the fact that it wasn't the people with whom Gabby was living who reported her missing. It was her parents who live so far away. No one's asking about who the Laundries are. Who are these people? I think we need to know this. This has captured so much of our attention, and the media put this forward. In fact, the Haitians the Haitians at the border living under these, seeking asylum and sanctuary here, they could not get at the top of the morning news or the evening news or the afternoon news. This was at the top, but no one's looking at this family.
And no one has still talked to this family in a way that can give real answers to Gabby's family, who is pleading for their assistance. And I think, again, it shows that people who abuse, as Brian clearly did, at least in the instance where the police were called, that was the opportunity. But at that point, when she is missing, when the behavior by the parents is beyond fishy, right? It's strategic. They saw that their son was going to be in trouble. They probably knew the truth that something happened to her. And instead of doing what is right for this young woman who was just 22 years old, living in their home, they have the compassion is not there. The responsibility is not there. They immediately start evading and providing resources to their son, who it seems likely that any evidence that was had probably disappeared on the camping trip that he went on with his parents. They finally got a hold of his phone as evidence, but they did not have to go through the scrutiny where we see in missing persons cases of the media, where you have to make statements to press, where you're walked into the police station and questioned, where anyone who is close to you is also questioned, where the media can ask questions in and out of that process, right? They are completely cloistered and cordoned off from all of that scrutiny. And the likelihood that evidence has been mishandled or destroyed at this point creates a problem for the justice system prevailing and finding out really what happened to this poor young woman who was most likely in a family system of abuse if she's living in that house, right? And again, to CK's point, I think what I would like to see people recognize, law enforcement included, is how are you handling calls like the one made by those folks who said, I need to pick up my phone and call the police because I see a young woman being hit right now, and I need to do something about it. And the police, there has to be a better process. There has to be a an agreed upon system throughout this country where we're not letting women go back into the arms of their abusers, because psychologically, you saw in that video, Gabby was apologizing. She was trying to take responsibility and deemed mentally unstable. He was not deemed mentally unstable. He was calm, cool, and collected, right? And so he gets to go cool off. But you're sending someone who, cooling off or not, there is a dangerous situation. There is an imbalance of physical power in that relationship. There was a clear evidence of physical abuse. Those two should be separated, and you should make sure that there's a cooling off period. The way to do that is to put that young man in jail for the evening and let him think about that process and give Gabby the space to really think about what the situation is, right?
I mean,
we should
and
not
counseling,
be putting that
right?
responsibility on the child.
And counseling. So when you talk
And
about,
she's not a child, but she's a young woman.
absolutely, because see, I never liked defund the police as a term. I agreed with the aims, but not the term, because that's just it takes us off the point. When you refund the police, you have counselors, you have psychologists, you have social workers, you have psychiatrists, you have people who could counsel her and him because they both need help, right?
Right.
And that's what you do. Let me go to Otis. Otis, very quickly, you have a question about the video. What's on your mind, Otis?
Hey, good morning. I was wondering, I heard about this case, and you said there's a video when the police are talking to them. I just want to know, did the police ask her, did he hit her, and if they see any bruises? And if they did, they should have took both of them into the police station and find out what really was happening. And I think she still would have been alive right now.
Aaron, your thoughts?
Yeah.
I think that you're absolutely right. And I think what we saw was a very emotional Gabby Petito in that video, right? Because once the police are called, there is this fear, especially for women that are in abusive relationships, that if she says the wrong thing, and he is standing right there for most of this conversation, there's very little time in that video where they are actually separated and she is alone to speak to police. But she knows that he is not going to be arrested, no matter what she says. At some point, she recognizes that, okay? So even if he does get in trouble, even if they're separated for a little bit, what's going to happen after they get back together? If she says the wrong thing, it could be worse, right? So if that's the system she's living in, if that's her reality in that van, that she says one wrong thing and he starts slapping her, this is not the first time that's happened.
Absolutely.
She's not alive anymore. That is not the first time this happened. So police need to take a 30,000-foot view of that situation. Yes, look the facts on the ground, but let's put this young woman's well-being, since she is in a physically detrimental position in comparison to this man, right? And make sure that we're thinking strategically, how can we keep her alive? Not how can we not make this man uncomfortable? And that is the privilege that he was given over her. The report says that she was having a mental health crisis, not him.
Can you imagine?
So they need to ask bigger questions than exactly what's happening there, right? Look at patterns of abuse. Look at how abusive men operate in these situations. Okay.
I mean, CK.
It's more complicated than what happened in that video, and they need to ask better questions.
Absolutely, because I mean, she's the one who's having the mental. You know, if someone is going upside your head, you're going to have a mental health issue, and he should have one too, and he's having one too, because it takes two. You know, it's a mutually unhealthy. They are locked into a sick ecosystem together, and I think we have to say that the abuser and the abused are both unwell, and they both need help. That having been said,
Absolutely.
CK, oh yeah, I mean, because, you know, I'm like, this child should not have been living with him and his parents in their house and all that, because that's just something, I don't know her story. There's a whole lot going on here. But, you know, hey, girls, people, empower your girls in particular. Empower your girls. My father told me when I was a little girl, Aaron and CK, I never want you to be beholden to a man and his money. If things get shaky, I want you to be able to leave or put him out. So I want you to get your education. I want you to know that you don't need him to buy you a fur coat. If you want one, you ought to be able to get it yourself. I hope he can get you one. If you want, amen. Trust me. If you want a big house, if you want status, whatever it is that you want, baby, I want you to be able to get it for yourself. Because if things get shaky, you can always be done with him. Let your girls know this. And let your sons know that they shouldn't be in unhealthy relationships either. Nobody deserves this. And we need to deal with the police, CK, because what you and Aaron have been bringing out, it just makes my head go. Before we talk about the debt ceiling, I literally have a minute before we go to this hard out, and I want to thank you both today. CK, closing thought in a minute.
Thank you, Santita. We've got to pay attention to this. We have to yell the name Jelani Day because we have to feel outraged about the disparity in treatment and the need for criminal justice reform, the need for policing reform. That illustrates the tragedy of the failure of the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, holding law enforcement accountable, but also holding those who manipulate the system unjustly accountable, as I believe Brian has done in this instance. My heart goes out to Jelani Day's family. My heart goes out to Gabby Petito's family. And when we see these things happening, remember they're a victim. Ask the questions. We need to force our police to investigate right there on the scene and not have selective investigations, but for all cases. Because as that caller said, under any other circumstances, both of them,
30.
At least him, Brian, would have been taken to the police station, probably arrested, but definitely interrogated. Definitely.
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. Skip Gates couldn't get back into his own home in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I mean, because the police said, no, I don't think you live here. One of the most famous academics in the world. Hey, everybody, it's just crazy. The uneven treatment is by police of the citizenry. It hurts us all. Let's talk about this debt ceiling, everybody. What is it? Why is it important to you? We all have skin in the game. Cesar, Borgia, I hear you. Feel you need to call me. Back in just a minute. Thank you, ladies. You all were great.
Well, thank you for having this conversation.
Well, hold on, everybody. On Monday night, yes, Let's Talk About It with Santita Jackson show will be back. Led by CK and a wonderful panel, including the glorious Aaron Connolly, attorney Aaron Connolly. We will be talking about the R. Kelly case on Monday night. I think it's 7:00 your time, CK, and at 6:00 Central Standard Time. So you don't want to miss this. You don't want to miss it. You don't want to miss it. It's going to be a really stirring, rousing conversation. Hope that you all got something from this Petito case. It breaks my heart, but I have to tell you what's infuriating to me, attorneys Connolly and Hoffler, is the fact that no one's questioning this family, and asking them what did you know and when did you know it? How did you treat this young lady? What's going on?
Yeah.
And how is it that this
We have
young
Dr.
lady was away? Thank you so much. Was away from her family. It's just there are a lot of things that we need to look at. Everybody, there's a lot that you have to look at.
And Santita, I just wanted to thank you for having this type of dialogue and raising these questions, raising these issues, and allowing different perspectives to be heard, because mainstream media is presenting a very, very different case, and it's really important for the rest of the story to be told. So thank you for facilitating that and enabling that and pushing for answers and justice.
Well, thank you. I want to thank you for, you all are both very, very, very busy lawyers, okay? And you always make time before you go to work to do this show. And I want to thank you for that. I really, really do. I wouldn't be able to do it without you. I don't know what to say. I don't know this stuff. I'm not a lawyer. You are, both of you. So there we go. Sending you much love. You all can say hello to Dr. Max Wolf before you go.
Good morning, everyone.
Dr. Wolf, how are you?
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm very different from you guys because I'm neither busy nor important nor a lawyer.
Don't fade it, isn't it? Don't even.
Good to be consistent. 0 for 3 is perfect consistency. Let's not overlook the achievement.
You know what, honey?
But you are extraordinary. You are extraordinary and an expert at all things important. So thank you.
Girl.
I'm going to peel off. Aaron, thank you so much. Always a pleasure and honor to share the stage with you. And I will be in touch.
Well, you know what? Joyce just called you all you called you guys a phenomenal dynamic duo. Right.
Very kind.
I love it. Thank you so much. Max.
Thank you both.
Oh, sending you much love. Sending you much love.
Thank you, and likewise.
Max,
Nice
I'm
to
so
be
glad
back.
to hear your voice. Oh, I've missed you.
Yes, I have to cultivate my only fan, and I did also miss our conversations. And hopefully, the audience has had that weird experience where enough time without someone makes them seem perhaps less annoying than they were when they were around. So I'm hoping for that too.
Well, my mother asked about you, and
Glad to see she's doing well.
Oh, raising Cain, you know it. I'm going to see her after I get off of here. We're going to actually go have
Wonderful.
lunch at
Good
some
news.
open air place. She said, I've just got to get out of here.
She 100%. She's fully recovered. That's great.
You know, I would say, it's a journey, but boy, I mean, her breath support is back. She's up and down the stairs. And, we just watch her
All right,
every
well, that's
day.
a good test.
Oh, yeah, no, she's doing quite well. Here we are.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
You got the power. You got the power. You got the power.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. I'm Santita Jackson. This is Thursday, September 30th. Can you believe it? 2021. And it's a beautiful day in Chicago. A beautiful day. Okay, it's going to be partly cloudy here and partly cloudy and thunderstorms up in Minneapolis, St. Paul. But beautiful day nonetheless. Remember, the sun is on the other side of the clouds. Always remember that. Call me or text me at 773-763 WCPT 773-763-9278. 773-763-9278. Hey, Carolyn and Jewel and Joyce and Dave and Stanley, hallelujah, Davis and D. Ray and oh my goodness, so many of you, and Anthony, so many of you are with us today. I want you to continue to like and share on the Santita Jackson and Friends page with my morning stars. I love you all so much. And the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Please continue to like and subscribe there. We've got a lot going on. And while we're dealing with the Petito case, Jelani Day, and the Haitians at the border, we have a debt crisis and we have a debt ceiling crisis. What is the debt ceiling? Why is it important to you? Why should you care about the debt ceiling? That's happening in Washington. Oh, no. Oh, so much is tied up with that. If America goes into default, we got a problem. It imperils the world economy. And I have one of the most brilliant minds, the brilliant economist, Dr. Max Wolf, who's here with us every Thursday at this time to talk about it. The debt ceiling, what is it, and should we be concerned about it, Dr. Wolf?
Yeah, and I think also just this idea that something is somehow far away or less important because it's in Washington, this is a conceit of people who don't want you to pay attention. It always matters. So most of your local budget, state and city, actually comes from the federal government. The federal government of the United States is the single largest buyer of goods and services in the world. So they spend about $4 or $5 trillion a year, about 20% of total economic activity in the U.S., right? So this is like a kid in high school, very much has that adolescent sort of dismissal of the essential. Is like, who cares how mom and dad are doing at work? I got my own thing going. I'm like, yeah, maybe. But if your own thing isn't living in a van, you probably want to pay a little bit of attention, right? So that I'd say if your own thing isn't living in a van, you should also be paying attention. And if you love the vans, enjoy. But even that van is on a subsidized road with subsidized gas, subsidized police, subsidized fire. So maybe even if you are in the van,
might want to cast the occasional eye. So yeah, it's not unimportant. A debt ceiling is a statutory limitation that we put in place really kind of starting around World War I. And the idea here was that we need an act of Congress, which is constitutional, to make spending decisions about the budget. The reason we started to get a different set of rules around World War I is around World War I lead up to and in that war, the U.S. federal government came from being what some people think it still is, kind of a small, distant thing in Washington, where the main way your life was sort of affected by government was local. So that belief about America, the states' rights, and we're kind of out here on our own, and that's sort of a hokey mythology. Yeah, it hasn't actually been factually correct in 104 years. Right, so the U.S. federal government is a global power, but it's also very much the local authority, and most of the budget of other local authorities is actually passed through, a lot of it, from the federal government anyway. So they're funding your local government and your state government. So you might want to have different rules in your state, but those different rules are still paid for, enforced, overseen, and receive or don't receive the imprimatur of the federal government at the legislative branch and the executive branch, right? So the government's it's a pretty big piece of the story. We've had these statutory limitations that if you want to go above a certain amount of indebtedness, the limit now is $28.4 trillion or $28.4 thousand billion. You need an act of Congress. And this isn't about spending any money, right? This is just about continuing to function. The Congress has to say, okay, we've bumped up against our ceiling, so we got to raise the ceiling. This never used to be political. It doesn't need to be. This is a fiction. Okay, so we have raised the ceiling 80 times, 50 times during a Republican presidency. So these Republicans that suddenly found Jesus on the deficit, they haven't been looking long. And they don't have much of a record here, right? So this is a miracle epiphany conversion to interest in the debt because they almost all voted a year ago and 2 years ago for Donald Trump's largest budget deficits in the history of the human race, including the U.S., without batting an eye in unison. Every single one of them voted for that. Okay, so there's no credibility in the concern for the budget. Pretending you care about deficits is just weaponizing the ignorance of the American public. And unfortunately, that can be a deep vein in this area. And so we've watched this game play out since the mid-'90s every few years, where if there's a Democratic president, and the Republicans want to hurt that president and help their chances in the midterm elections, they pretend to care about budget deficits for a while and create havoc and actually, ironically, hurt the government and the health of the U.S. economy in a weird theatrical performance in which they pretend to care about it. Now, the Democrats don't have a great record of caring about deficits either, and they have tended to find their religion on budget balances only when there's a Republican president. So both parties have some guilt here, but this is a very disruptive, very dangerous erosion of American economic power in the world that risks serious economic damage in order to do campaign videos and grandstanding on nightly news and Sunday talk shows for Republicans for the midterm election. So this is somebody's kidnapped your kid and they're playing chicken with a dump truck in order to get some exciting videos for their campaign ads. But, when someone does that, they can still crash and they always do some damage. So this has already done some damage.
We're talking with Dr. Max Wolf about the debt ceiling. And we need to talk about that. You need to understand why it's important to you, why these infrastructure packages that we're seeing the moderate Democrats, really the corporocrats, if you will, they are pushing back on the progressives who, this is how Joe Biden won the election. He won the election on progressive ideas, everybody. That's what he won on. We need to look at that. We need to look at this debt limit. The Senator Sinema, Dr. Max Wolf, and Manchin said the $3.5 trillion, that's just unworkable. But they won't give the president and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer a top line number. Okay, if $3.5 trillion doesn't work, what do you want to cut? Now, Bernie Sanders, for his portion, and I agree with him, he said, we're not going to cut a thing. Who are you going to cut? What are we talking about? What is in the $1 trillion deal What's in the $3.5 trillion, and can we afford it? And can we afford not to have these infrastructure deals in place?
Yeah. So part of the sort of confusion that reigns here is in one place in American life, Americans have been taught you just want the cheapest one available, right? So as a country, we don't believe in getting the off-brand Oreo cookies or the off-brand cola or the off-brand toothpaste or the off-brand toilet paper. And we've been taught that getting the right brand in shoes or toilet paper is life and death. But you want the cheapest, crappiest government money can buy. Medicare, give me the cheapest one you got. Infrastructure, how about the crappiest on offer, right? So in every other decision in life, we make a decision about how much we want to spend and what we want to get. I would urge people to bring that same sentiment to government, okay? So why does this matter? Well, the roads, the bridges, the airports, the national defense, the education, the college grants, the court system, right? The science and technology investments, all kinds of things, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, they all rely on this federal government. And if we miss the debt ceiling here, all these payments will start to be curtailed. It'll also create a recessionary downdraft, and it will lay bare to the world dramatically yet again that we can't be trusted and we can't function. Part of the story people don't tell you is if you're $28.4 trillion in debt, and we are, you owe the rest of the world a lot of money. And if you owe someone a lot of money, maybe showing up to a big meeting in sweatpants with a stain on the front of your T-shirt isn't a good idea. This is showing up to the meeting in sweatpants with a stain on your shirt and a dress shirt tucked into your sweats, right? This is showing up on the world stage in a moment of importance, the worst way you've ever been caught by someone you know in a gas station at night. When you thought better of going out looking like that because you thought you'd get away with it, and then you bumped into someone, right? So this is a bad look. And if you owe this much money to your own citizens and to folks around the world, and we do, then it's a particularly bad idea. Now, where the rubber meets the road there is that how much interest you pay is a big issue when you owe that much money. So you pay interest on that debt. And if the world begins to see us as untrustworthy because we do things like say we won't pay back, or we're less than 15 hours from failing to pay, to be able to fund our own activity as a $28.4 trillion indebted government, right? 15 hours is pretty close. Now, there's a funny thing here. Can we pay it back? In the short term, the way the U.S. government pays back its debts is the reason the world lent us this much in the first place, and the reason the interest rates are low. The reason we can pay back the debt is because the debt is all denominated in U.S. dollars. And so the same government that owes the money has the sole legal right to create those dollars and pay people back with those dollars. It's not quite that simple, but close enough, right? So the U.S. government can create the currency with which it needs to pay this money back. And most countries can't, and that gives the U.S. great power and allows us to be very much in debt without paying high interest rates, even though we have all that debt. And here comes the caveat, as long as the world permits us that privilege.
Okay, stay right
Yeah.
there. I need you to back that up and explain that. Explain the fact that we can print our own money, right? And the privilege that the world is extending to us. Please explain that.
Yeah, so for a while it was the British. Sometimes that was called Pax Britannica, being kind of astride the world during the great period of British dominance, in modern history. And sometimes that's been, replaced by what's called Pax Americana. So if you are the sole government that can produce the global gold of the moment, or the global currency that's the universally accepted reserve currency, which right now is the U.S. dollar, you have what's called seigniorage in the old monetary term, seigniorage. And what Charles de Gaulle, the former president of France, had the best term. He called it America's exorbitant privilege. So we have this ability, so long as we could keep the faith in the world, to basically go deeper into debt without having to pay much to be so deeply in debt, because we were issuing the global gold standard currency, the U.S. dollar. These episodes tarnish that, and they expedite the day in which it's not true. That day, or as those days approach, the amount of debt we have will begin to cause us to have to spend a lot of money. How much? Well, if the U.S. paid more of a global average, it would already be $80 or $90 billion a year more in interest payments. And if we had to go to historically higher interest rates, things that were normal 10 years ago, before the Fed cut those interest rates, you'd be looking at a $700 or $800 billion hole in the budget. Because the truth is, we can only afford to be this much in debt if we can borrow more and pay very low interest rates. Otherwise, we'll spiral out of control because the debt is so large. And then you'll have a global financial catastrophe. So, you are playing chicken with a steamroller on a bicycle here. It's not a great idea. And I'm sure it makes for exciting footage, and it sounds good, and people who don't pay attention and want to believe this, which is a significant portion of the electorate, can feel like their Republican friends or moderate Democrats are keeping a leash on these tax and spend Dems. But the truth is, Republicans love tax cuts, but they don't cut the spending. So they blow huge holes in the deficit. And Democrats have historically wanted to do the spending, but have been unable or unwilling to raise the taxes. Very bipartisan, although contrary to what most people think, the Republican Party has made a larger contribution to the budget deficits because they've been addicted to tax cuts for wealthy individuals, but people in general, and for corporations. And that's obviously not great for the budget. And here comes the earth-shattering complexity that apparently most people can't master. Slashing how much income you take blows a hole in your budget, just like spending more.
What does it mean? Because blowing the hole in the budget, what people want to know is what will it mean to us?
What it already means to us.
If they don't raise this debt ceiling limit, what will this mean? Because look, Mitch McConnell blocked the president on his Supreme Court nomination. I think he'll do anything to make
just one president, but sure. They'll probably try that again if there's another opening. Yeah, look, this is a game where you fight just to fight, because what the Republicans have going for them, they've kind of figured out, is anger at Democrats. Right, so there is a lesson here, right? If your core proposals are unpopular with most of your own voters, then all you could do is whip people up into a foamy froth about how terrible the other guy is. And that's proved to be very good. Hating elites, hating liberals, hating Democrats is the core of the brand now. Right? You don't need my opinion on that, which you may or may not believe anyway. That's their opinion on it. We have to oppose everything this president does. This president has to be unpopular. This president has to be stopped. That's not actually an ideological agenda, right? That's hey, if I make this guy unpopular, people will overlook what's wrong with me, right? Mm-hmm. This is kind of a high school game, but it works very well, right? And it's become a sort of home team versus rival game, where you tell the general public it's a spectator sport and the other guy's evil. Right? And it does seem to kind of work. And so you're going to oppose all this stuff. The truth is that most economists, left, right, and center, think we need infrastructure spending, which is a lot of what that $3.5 trillion is, because infrastructure spending does a few things that we clearly need. It modernizes our economy. It makes our businesses more competitive with other businesses around the world. It improves our ability to move goods and services around. Right now, it also gives us a chance to respond to climate change, which is no longer something that is not part of our everyday lives. Climate change is now bad enough, late enough, that it's now kind of part of our life, even if it shows up in different parts. In some places, it's flooding. In other places, it's much hotter summers. In other places, it's much colder winters. In other places, it's dry or wet or whatever it is. It's here, right? So it gives us a chance to do something about the global warming. It gives us a chance to have a competitive economy so that we can be competing for jobs and manufacturing in other areas in other countries. And it also has a bit of a sense of equalization, because better public transit and infrastructure and electric grids and sustainable energy has a sort of social benefit that tends not to be upward distributive. So it tends to be general, helps everybody. And so I think if we're in a moment where we need more unity and we'd like to still be able to do things like breathe air and go outside and stuff like that, then this is probably going to be interesting to a lot of folks. It will cost money. We are very in debt. That part's true. But that's no less true now than when we discussed the tax cuts, right? no less true now when we discussed how big the military should be, right? It's no less true now when we discuss this or that. Again, I feel like I am always the guy on the show who says this, which is annoying, but we're still not done with COVID. So risking the function of the federal government, which is America's lifeline during COVID, whatever critique people have for how the government's doing, it is our lifeline, right? It is what's supporting and funding all this stuff for COVID response. Weakening it during a pandemic is probably a particularly bad idea. So we're in a fragile economic recovery in a pandemic. This might not be the time to roll the dice for a bunch of good web clips.
We're talking with Dr. Max Wolf about the debt ceiling, about our economy, about the strength. There's so much, the strength of our economy. There's so much that we take for granted because we have the strongest economy in the world, the number one economy in the world. Will that always be true, Dr. Wolf? And
of course not.
Please help me, because we're the world's reserve currency. What does that mean? And how does that impact people like me and you?
Yeah. It means the world puts its faith in you, so it gives you extraordinary power, right? Which is one way that gives you power is you can monetize your debts. You can go really seriously into debt, and it doesn't cost you that much so long as people they have faith in you, right? But if that faith evaporates, then you're only as strong as you really are strong. And so a responsible way to deal with that authority is to keep yourself in good shape, right? So since I teach economics, I've tried to come up with analogies that make these things a little bit easier. And the one I like to think about is your economy in the United States is a little bit like your spine. You really tend to think about it only when something is wrong. But as soon as something is even a little bit wrong, you realize, whoa, this spine, this thing is pretty important, right? This is part of my nervous system. It keeps me upright. It's the center of all these nerves, so it can create enormous pain. It can make me inflexible. It can cripple me. Okay? So we have often taken for granted, some of us much more than others, that we live in a very successful, wealthy country. Right? Not all the people, not all the time, but generally speaking, one of the wealthier, more successful countries in terms of building and sustaining an economic power, right? So $21 trillion a year economy. So it's a big economy. And while we have lots of issues that have worsened with inequality and some other things, there's still a lot of wealth going around out there, even if we're not so good at distributing it equitably or through meritocracy all the time. If the economy gets hit, then it makes us all. It means that all of us, however we do it, are dividing a smaller pie, right? And then these battles over who gets what tend to get much more intense and much more combative because there isn't enough, right? Or there's less than there was. So it also tends to aggravate distributional issues if the economy doesn't grow, right? That being said, America, the story of America, it's a young country where the social glue has been advancement. My kids will do better than me. I will do better than I used to do. I can do better. I can be more successful. And we tend to worship the success. So if people start to believe that they can't be successful if they play by the rules, you start to have massive social problems. And to some extent, that is the story of the last 20 years, 30 years. So we're already in this problem. And if we were to damage our global leadership, we will instantly have to fight harder for less. Right? And, stop and think about this. Anything that weakens the dollar makes all your imports more expensive. Look around your house.
It will cost us more to get a television, to get a car.
I mean, it'll cost us more to get all of our clothes, much of our food, all of our electronics, probably a bunch of our gas, definitely our car, right? All those things are important. And if our government can't spend as much money on all the things it spends for us, because it has to spend more on debt service, right? It has to spend more for the debt, then it cuts our budgets, our healthcare budgets, our budgets for the elderly, our budgets for infrastructure, our budgets for education, our budgets for social welfare. They would all get cut. The last thing to think about is, if we have to spend a lot more money on the debt, it will redistribute wealth upward. Because who do you think loans money to the government in the form of buying these bonds? to generally affluent people and companies, right? So a funny piece of it that no one ever tells you is these tax cuts, they create this weird upward wealth redistribution that people don't talk about. So if I cut the taxes of wealthy people and corporations, then I, the government, who just cut their taxes, have less money. And they, the wealthy individuals and the big companies, they have more money because I cut their taxes. So how do I sustain my spending if I'm the government? Oh, yeah, I borrow it from those people whose taxes I just cut. And then I pay it back with interest. And so over time, you end up redistributing wealth upward. As you cut taxes, the government doesn't have enough money to do what it needs to do or what it's chosen to do. And so they borrow the money. And over time, they end up paying 103 cents, 104 cents on the dollar back. So it becomes this weird upward wealth redistribution conveyor belt, too, which has aggravated some pretty substantial and growing issues in this society that we have about how equitable are we in our distribution of wealth. So if you're interested in those issues, too, these decisions also affect that.
We've been talking with Dr. Max Wolf, brilliant economist, about the debt ceiling. You have skin in the game. It is economics really is your business. We are able to float on.
If you have skin in this game.
How about that? I love it. Can you stay with me for a minute just after we get off there, just really quickly, because Carissa wants you to speak to canceling student loans, federal student loan debt. And so I just want to speak with you on the other side of that, because the fact is Americans out here were hurting. My brother Jesse, the former congressman, said, we are the best dressed poor people on earth. Americans really, and we're struggling even more than we ever have. Did you know that the American government really is such an economic power in the world? Did you know that? Did you know that it is to our advantage to keep our government strong and functioning? So you have to call out these people who would disrupt that. It is to our advantage for all of us to be strong and functioning. So we've got to grow up in our politics, everybody. Grow up in how we treat everybody. Everybody should do well, and we should do well together, and we can. I'm Santita Jackson, Dr. Max Wolf. See you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show. Dr. Wolf, can you speak
I'm not sure Americans are the best dressed people in the world either.
He said no, he's the best dressed poor people.
I'll leave that alone.
Best dressed poor people.
Yeah, I'm not even sure if that's true.
That's true.
Really well dressed poor people. Well, my experience, having traveled pretty extensively, Ethiopians are the best dressed really poor people you ever see.
Well, you talk about stylish, but come on now, you're talking about high fashion.
Stylish, and also somehow this ability to walk around in a filthy, dusty place with platinum white clothes, not get any dirt on it. It's like magic. I can't figure out. This is like a trick. But it's a trick that people really have in really low income countries.
Absolutely. But cleanliness is next to godliness. I mean, if you went to poor Black communities, just growing up, there was a thing about being clean. Cleanliness is next to godliness. I mean, my mother's mother, you had to change clothes. You wore your clothes that you wore in the world. And when you got home, you washed off the dirt of the day, as they called it. And you changed your clothes, which were freshly pressed and clean. You didn't wear anything twice with my grandmother Gertrude. But just before you go, Carissa Jones and a lot of people have a lot of concerns about their personal debt. Would the cancellation of all federal student loans, would that hurt the government? Would it help people? What can be done about that?
Well, so there has been some debt forgiveness, and there are some debt forgiveness programs in place now, and the Biden administration has pushed to extend those, including some moratorium, which is not debt forgiveness, but it's suspending payments that are due during the periods of unemployment and or periods of the coronavirus, right? So there have been some efforts in this space. The conundrum around student loan debt is that probably a blanket forgiveness doesn't make sense for a host of reasons that we can go through. But the issue with the student loan debt is it's not that much money, depending on how you do it, but it's significant. So a little bit over $1 trillion in total student loan debt now. So it's not a tiny amount of money. But the bigger issue would become the way that student loans, the way that the programs are set up, is that the money that's repaid by the students of the past creates the ability to make loans to the students of the future and the present, right? So if you just did a forgiveness, you'd have to refund the program. Otherwise, you'd do a forgiveness and you'd be denying the students in school now or applying to school or over the next few years, you'd be denying them access to those student loans, which I think is something you couldn't excuse, right? You couldn't excuse doing that. So you have to figure out some kind of balance here. And also remember that plenty of people get student loans, they get better jobs, they stay employed, and they're able to afford their student loans. So I think you'd want to distinguish between people who are genuinely having a hard time and people who aren't, and that would significantly reduce how much it would cost to forgive student loans, right? The smarter argument is to give people some breathing room in their student loans and then come up with rules. And so people who go to underserved areas or work in public service should be able to earn an expedited forgiveness. Right? But I think if you borrowed the money and it helped you the way it's supposed to and you can pay your student loans back, you should pay them back.
Of course, of course.
But the question is a little bit more forbearance and opportunities for folks who find themselves unable to do it. And then the big thing that most people very reasonably are worried about when they talk about student loans, to me, the student loans discussion is important, but it kind of misses the point. Educational affordability is the bigger point. Because the student loans are not the right place to look on some level. The bottom line is that people who especially want to or are willing to enter public service shouldn't be asked to literally mortgage their future to get an education. So I think we have a crisis of higher education affordability here more than just the student loans. The student loans are kind of the way that we've come up with a private for-profit solution to that educational affordability issue. But the educational affordability, I think, is the actual issue. The student loan is kind of a symptom of that. But yeah, systems of forbearance are important. Like we need to have a good workout plan and we need to have means testing so that if you can't pay your loan back for a while or possibly longer, there should be a pretty easy process. And the other problem is lots of different loans with different rules, tons of paperwork, lots of errors and confusion, very pre-modern, very difficult, right? So part of the problem we have in the U.S. right now, and student loans are just an example, unemployment is an example, Medicaid is an example, is getting the social benefits we do offer is a humiliating, disrespectful hellscape of weird rules, unhelpful bureaucracies, and archaic paperwork. And so modernizing that so it's simple and easy with more of a customer service kind of bend to it would make a lot of people's lives a lot better and would make these systems more efficient.
You know, because there was a time in our parents' time, they were able to go get summer jobs and they were able to work their way through school. That's impossible now. I mean, NYU's $100,000, Columbia, University of Chicago, I mean, on and on and on. $100,000 a year for undergrad. It's just unaffordable. Excuse me, for basic people. And quite frankly, for upper middle class people, or even moderately wealthy people, it's just unaffordable. What are your closing thoughts for today? What should we be looking for?
I think it's affordability. When we talk about government budgets, we talk about what our priorities are. If education is a priority, not just that we say it's a priority, which we do, but then it's not a priority, you got to spend more money on it, and you have to make sure that your money goes further on it with more accountability. And I think we could do a smart version of this. I think people who are willing to work in underserved or lower-income communities, people who are going to go into areas where we have shortages of workers, should get their student loans an expedited forgiveness and repayment, right? I think you need to have a process to handle workouts for student loans that's fast and discreet and humane, right? And you should probably means test the forgiveness so that you don't throw the money away, but that people can get a second chance. And I think the big issue here is educational affordability. If you need to go to college to have a middle-class life, which I think most people believe is likely the case for most folks, not everyone, but most folks, then college has to be within the reach of middle-class people, and it isn't. So that's the actual problem to me, more than the student loans. But like every time the government makes a decision about spending and taxing, they're making a decision that redistributes wealth and has to do with the vitality of the economy. So the taxes are interesting depending on what gets taxed and who pays it. And spending is always interesting based on what we spend money on and who receives the benefit. That's the interesting question. Abstract questions about levels of spending and taxation don't really make any sense.
What do you think about that, everybody? What about what about an affordable education? That would make a lot of difference. I really do believe that's the key. I really think that's the key. And depending upon the profession that you go into, if you're going into some service profession, you shouldn't have to go into that as well. I mean, we have to sit down, Max, and think these things through and talk these things through. Really. Debate. We don't have to fight. But I mean, I think the end goal, I mean, really, we have to start with the end in mind. And the goal should be a more perfect union, a healthy society, a society in which everyone prospers, or certainly has the opportunity to. And if we do that, we're going to have to, we have to go another way. So, Dr. Wolf, it's always a joy to be with you. Always a joy.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. Hopefully, we'll have good tidings on this subject between now and next Thursday.
What do you think?
We'll know pretty soon because.
What do you think?
Yeah, we're T-minus here, like less than 15 hours. Because it's midnight Eastern Standard would be when we probably hit the wall here. If we don't get some kind of last hour. It looks to me like they're going to try to do a last hour thing that lets them do this ridiculous theater of the absurd again in a month.
Yeah.
So there was an attempt to try to raise this for a while, but that the Republican Party wants to do this again even closer to the election, which to me signals that they are absolutely convinced that the public here is absolutely disinterested and ignorant. And I hope they're wrong, but I don't know that the public gets all that into these things. The last time we saw them actually do this was in the 90s, or 2011. Our debt was downgraded, right? And there was some indication then, at least, obviously the world's different. That was 10 years ago, but there was some indication then that the public really turned on this idea. So one of the ironies of this is the Republican Party does pretty well talking about shutting down the government, how useful it is, unless the government shuts down for 30 seconds. So everyone starts freaking out and panicking because they're not getting all the stuff they get from the government. So if you actually shut the government down, your little ideological game that the government's wasteful, it doesn't matter, it starts to backfire really fast because everyone's like, hey, where's my check? Right? So it's not clear. They're going to run out of leverage somewhere. But look, playing chicken with our economic position in the world for personal gain is not good leadership.
I don't think so. I mean, look, Boeing is basically government outsourced. They get the majority of their contracts from the federal government, as many of our corporations do. And so when we play these games with the funding of the government, as so many of these people do, I don't know what they're trying. I don't know what the end is. I mean, because many of them are in service of the corporatocracy and corporations anyway. It's just it hurts the rest of us. It hurts everybody. Yeah, it hurts everybody. Carissa wants to thank you in a special way, Dr. Wolf, for taking her question.
Thank you, Carissa.
Oh, absolutely. She said it's good to hear the rationale of an economist. And I hear you. She said
there's a lot of competition for advice here, and lots of people will tell you that you can become the sovereign country of blah, blah, blah. And never pay any taxes again. I mean, that probably feels really good at first, but you will end up in federal prison. So, yeah, probably not a good idea.
Don't pay any attention to him, Carissa. Really. When I met him a long time ago, someone said to me, do you know, Max has a really great sense of humor. I was like, really? Every time I'm with him, he's so serious and he's so nice and blah, blah, blah. And then I met Max.
Turned out none of it was true. Not smart, not serious, not nice, lousy sense of humor.
Like I said, then I met Max and said, oh?
That was a young glue horse.
Oh, boy. Oh, I just love you, Max. I just love you to pieces. I'm going to call you in a little bit, but I'm going to release the studio.
Thank you very much.
Oh, no, look.
Thanks all. Always a pleasure. Look, hopefully we'll get a short-term solution on this, but look forward to seeing Matt Gaetz be morally indignant about budgets. That's definitely a stretch.
Oh, and I just have to tell you on the air, several of my father's doctors, when he was in rehab up to last week, were complimentary of you.
Huh.
They said they look forward to hearing you. I said, "Oh my goodness, I was so moved by that." They were like, "Oh, John Nichols, oh that Max Wolf, he's a stitch, brilliant." I said, "Oh, I can't wait to let him know. This is great." My father even called me to put one of the doctors on the phone.
That's very kind of them.
Oh.
Obviously, they have a thing for sick people. So it's a perfect match.
I love it.
Yeah, look, that's very kind of them. I will look forward to speaking with you later, and thanks to everyone out there in radio land and internet land.
Absolutely. Sending you much love. Mwah. I'll talk to you in a little bit.
Take care. Be well.
Sending all of you much love. Thank you so much for being with us today. I hope you had a great time. Hope you got something good out of the show today. We got a lot to talk about, a lot. So I'm sending you much love, everybody. Pay attention to this money. Pay attention to the government because it's yours. It's yours. It's ours. It's yours. It's yours. I love everybody. Thank you, Paul. Have a great day, everybody. God bless.